Hey everyone, today I wanted to do a video about this weapon light here, which is the INFORCE APL. Now, I've had some experience with other weapon-mounted lights before, specifically ones made for handguns like the Streamlight TLR series, as well as the Surefire X300, both of which I've used in an inside the waistband capacity as well as an outside the waistband. And I have to tell you, by far, my favorite for inside the waistband is going to be the INFORCE APL. So let me go ahead and knock out some of the specs. First of all, it has a 200 lumen light, which runs off one CR123 battery, which is included with the package, and it will run for approximately an hour and a half on that battery. If you're interested in the weight with a battery is approximately 2.8 ounces. You can also pick these up in, this is the black. To me it's kind of more of a charcoal, but this is the black, and they also have an FDE version. And then they also say that these are waterproof to a depth of 66 feet, so even if you are in a super humid place like Florida or anywhere in the south, you don't have to worry about moisture getting into this thing. Now, there are two different modes that you can use this flashlight in. There is a constant on and a momentary on. Basically, if you just tap the toggle switch, it will be a toggle to either on or off. And then if you press and hold it for any length of time, then it's a momentary only while you're actually pushing down on that button. Try to shine it off a little bit more so you can actually see my finger on the light, and as soon as I let go, the light turns off. And then as far as the light pattern itself, I think it's pretty much ideal for a weapon-mounted light. It's not too defined, it doesn't have a really hard edge on it, and it spills out pretty far, which I like in a weapon light. I want to also add that the 200 lumens I think is also ideal for home defense. I think a lot of times people go a little bit overboard when it comes to weapon lights. They like to get as bright as they possibly can. But if you've ever done any sort of training indoors, you know that self-blinding is a thing, especially if you got a bunch of mirrors or picture frames or anything else where that light's going to bounce off, or even just a white wall. If you have a light that's too bright, you're not only going to blind the bad guy, but you're also going to blind yourself. So I think 200 lumens is pretty much ideal as far as a weapon-mounted light goes for inside the home. Now, one of the things that I like about this particular light is the way you activate it. Even with my finger keeping it straight off the trigger, I can actuate that. Now, ideally, straight off the trigger isn't out over the trigger guard like this, it's more up here, but even still, I can actuate that. And then once I make that conscious decision to fire, obviously I don't want to be keeping my light on any more than I have to. So once I've identified that target, I can immediately press onto that trigger. Or if I choose, I can also use my support hand thumb to basically actuate that out there and press onto it and keep it on when I need it. So it's fairly simple to use, and I think the method of actuation is better than some of the other lights that I've used myself. Now, the other big thing I love about this light is the form factor. Now, if you look at the width of this light, looking down from the top of the slide, it is barely any wider than the actual gun itself, which makes this thing perfect, like I said, for inside the waistband carry. So for example, this is the holster that I use to carry, and you can tell that the part for the slide, again, isn't really any wider than the part for the actual light itself, which makes this thing extremely comfortable inside the waistband. I've tried carrying inside the waistband with both the Surefire X300 as well as the Streamlight TLR1, and in my opinion, those lights are a little bit wide. Just as a comparison here, I have the X300 from Surefire, and if I hold it up next to the INFORCE, you can see that it is quite a bit wider, which it may not look like a lot here, but when it's inside your waistband, you really start to notice. And then also I have here the TLR1, which even on the wider 45 frame on this Glock 21, again, perspective is a little bit off, but you can tell that it is substantially wider than the gun itself, which again complicates things for inside the waistband. Now, I know Surefire also has just recently come out with their XC1 weapon light, which is going to be a lot slimmer, more along the lines of this APL. I've yet to try that. I'm going to be getting my hands on one soon, so you can expect a review on that here pretty soon. But again, for the time being, I really like this light for inside the waistband. Now, that said, I've also run this outside the waistband on like a paddle style holster multiple times, or even in a drop leg, which one thing I like is I had a, well, I still have a really nice Safariland 6004 holster for this Glock 19, which is made to carry this TLR1, but because of the shape of the APL, I can still use that holster that's made for the TLR1 with this APL with no issues whatsoever, and it's still not flopping around too crazy. So that was kind of one nice thing that I noticed myself. Another thing that I've liked about this is the standoff between the muzzle and the actual light itself creates basically a standoff here that will prevent it from clouding up. Just the other day I was going through and doing the whole warm-up course that Travis Haley posted on his YouTube channel, the Venti 100 shot, which I'll go ahead and link in the description below. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend checking it out and trying it for yourself. It's, to me, an excellent warm-up if you're only going to use a 100 rounds. It gets a lot of good training in. But anyway, so I went through that 100 rounds, plus whatever I've shot through this thing before, which is, you know, well into the hundreds. And I've not had to clean this lens once, and it's still, as you can tell, pretty clear. Now, compare that with the TLR1, which, going through less than a box of ammo on this 45, clouded up pretty significantly to the point where the light itself is pretty diminished. Now, I understand that 45 is inherently dirtier than something like 9mm, but even when I have this TLR1 mounted to my Glock 19 here, if I run it through an entire class, even a class with as low a round count as 150, it still clouds up fairly significantly, which again is not an issue with this APL. Now, as far as how it mounts, they've changed it a little bit. They used to have a quick disconnect system where I believe you just pulled down on something similar to the quick disconnect on the Surefire, where you pulled down and then you were able to slide it off. Currently now they have a screw that pretty much you loosen that up, which I have it on pretty tight so it goes into my holster fairly easily. But you loosen that up, you're able to pull it off, maybe a little bit more. And you can see that they have a little attachment in here where if I pulled this section all the way off, you can swap out this attachment to make it fit pretty much any style of rail you have. You can either fit it to regular 1913 style rails, you can fit it to Glocks, you can fit it to SIGs, whatever type of gun you have, they have a insert that will fit that style of gun. So that's a really nice thing to have. Now, they do also make a specific APL for Glocks, so if you are only running Glocks, then you don't have to worry about swapping out any parts. It will literally mount to whatever Glock you have because it's specifically designed for that. Then they also have this generic one, like the one I have here, and they're even now making an IR version that has visible light and IR, so if you're running nods, that's a really cool thing to have, so you're not flooding the room with light, at least not visible light, so you can still see what's going on without everyone else being able to see what's going on as well. Now, I personally think that if you have a handgun for self-defense, especially for home defense, you need a light on it, because to me it's more important to identify the bad guy and make sure it's not someone I love than it is to give away my position. Because if you shoot someone you love, which happens all the time in home defense situations, that's something you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life, whether or not you face criminal charges. So again, I would much rather be able to see what I'm shooting at than accidentally shoot the wrong person. So again, I think lights are hugely important, and if you're going to pick one up, I really like this INFORCE. Now, I will say I have seen multiple people who their mounting system will crack, but that only happens under pretty extreme scenarios. For example, I know the Haas USMC, when he was going through some of the contractor courses at Tactical Response over in Tennessee, I believe his cracked when he dropped it, running from point A to point B in some pretty harsh conditions. So if you're looking for something for duty use, I would more recommend something like the X300, because if you are carrying for duty use, it's probably going to be outside the waistband, so the width isn't a huge deal, and something like the X300 is going to be much more durable to abuse than this APL. But something to keep in mind, this APL runs anywhere between $130 to $150, whereas something like the X300 is going to be significantly more expensive. Even their XC1, the much smaller version that they just came out with, runs for about $300, so twice the cost of this APL. So that's something you need to take into account if you're going to pick up a weapon light. But as far as everyday carry goes, where you're going to spending most of the time in the holster, you don't have to worry about this thing being damaged. You know, even when I've dropped this thing on the range, granted it's typically into grass or mud, it hasn't broken on me yet, and I don't anticipate that it will, again, unless I'm putting it through some pretty significant abuse. But again, that's something you want to keep in mind. Again, if you're going to abuse it, you want to go with something a little bit sturdier, like this Surefire X300. So that's pretty much it. At least that's all I have to say about this. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please throw those in the comment section below. I'll try to get back to you as quick as I can. For those of you interested, I now have a website that you can check out where I will link all my new videos, as well as some other commentaries I have on different things going on. So I'll go ahead and link that below, or you can check it out yourself. It's OreGear.org currently. Hopefully in the future I'll get the .com as well. But as always, I hope you were able to get something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching.